You sell your soul for eternal life. You know, drink blood and fuck forever. Alright class, settle down and let me tell you a story. Big things are definitely happening in the 40k universe, and one of its most prolific YouTube creators just dropped a remix. So we definitely have to check it out. But before we do, please like, share, subscribe, do the whole notification button thing to help me out with the algo, and here we go. Alright, oh my god, I mean, we are back because Bricky has a new one and my handler simply will not let it go. A lot of things are going down in the Games Workshop world, which might be the reason for this re-explanation. Hopefully we learn something new. Here we go. Full volume, okay.
In the kind brightness of the far past, there was no war. Our
No
galaxy
war.
was, for a long time, fairly empty and quiet. The first known species to appear during this time are known only as the Old Ones, cosmic entities that traveled across the galaxy with ease and seeded life through the stars.
Why?
Shortly thereafter, a new species began to arise. The Necron tier. Evolving under the harshness of a devastatingly powerful star, the short-lived and irradiated Necron tier try to find the secret to eternal life and to be freed from their...
Who created the Necron tier? One of the philosophical theories about God or about creation is that there has to be a first mover. Someone has to be there to create other beings. Someone has to put life into other beings. So question is, who made or who moved the Necrontiers into being?
terrible existence. As they expand through the stars, they find the Old Ones and they plead to them to share the secrets of the universe and grant them purchase from their short and painful existence.
Very Greek mythology, no? Mankind asking for the gift of fire or stealing the gift of fire from their gods. And in this case, the gift of fire is eternal life, which almost always or usually backfires.
The Old Ones respond with a
No.
lol and a lamau, and with their immense power, they force them back to their homeworld. The Necron tier, filled with rage and hatred, make it their duty to get revenge on the Old Ones. A revenge that would...
Is it me or has Bricky lost weight? Good for him though, he looks good! Our boy looks good!
come swiftly as a chance encounter with other gods gave them a solution. These other gods were known as the Catan, a race of highly powerful star-consuming entities. Do not fear, young mortals, for we, the Catan, will provide you with the immortality you seek. Come now, won't you shake a poor sinner's hand?
So we now have the triangle, the Necrontiers, the Old Ones, and now the Catan, offering the latter power against the Old Ones. We'll see how it goes.
Quoted from Mephetron, the Deceiver. The Necron tier accepted the Catan's offer of immortality, but believe it or not, this turned out to be a ruse. A trick. The Catan crafted gigantic furnaces and began the process of biotransference. The Necron tier willingly walked line by line into the furnace engines made by gods who devour stars and had their souls consumed instead. The short-lived, irradiated, and cancer-inflicted race of the Necron tier ceased to be, and the immortal, soulless Necrons remained. Now backed by the immense power of the Catan, the Necrons rally against the Old Ones, and the bitter conflict in the stars at this time is known as the War in Heaven. Despite creating various races and entities...
See, we now have the Necrons, of course the Old Ones, and the Catans. Which side is which, and why did this... Why would the Catans have this beef with the Old Ones? I mean, we definitely know why the Necrons have beef with the Old Ones, but why would the Catan interfere like that? Give them this kind of power in exchange for their soul. And why are the Necrontyr so willingly surrendered themselves to this power just to destroy the old ones? What were they hoping to achieve? Were they hoping to basically beat the old ones into submission to giving them eternal life? The Catan literally provided it to them, but not in the way they think. They literally sold their souls for immortal life. That's the same logic as the vampires, or the same as you sell your soul for eternal life. Drink blood and fuck forever, according to that one dude.
To aid them in this battle, the old ones are overwhelmed and eradicated down to the last, due to the sheer power of the Catan fat off the souls of the Necrontyr, and with an army of unthinkable robotic slaves at their behest. However, the Catan are greedy, spiteful gods, and when there was no foe worth killing, they turn on each other. The Necrons then put their sights towards the Catan and lay waste to them, securing their freedom. The once subservient Necrons...
So they were destroyed by their own creation. Okay, got it. They built the Necrons in order to destroy the old ones, at least the Catans, and now that the war is over, the weapon turns back against them. Double-edged sword.
Now control their former masters. Worn out and weakened by these wars, the Necrons under their leader Zarek, the Silent King, lie dormant with a plan to eventually wake and reclaim control over the galaxy. Over millions of years, empires rise and they fall.
Wait, can someone please put it down if you have something similar, or if you can come up with a mythos or any other religious dogma that provides the same, that about the death and resurrection. See, here's the thing, right? Why bother sleeping at all? You've won the war, what now? But why sleep anyway? You've already conquered the world. You've already killed like 2 godlike entities. You've killed the old ones and you've killed the Catans. You now rule all. So why sleep?
The species created by the old ones have footholds over the galaxy, but on a pale blue dot in the thick of all this conflict, humanity begins to evolve.
Yay!
And for the most part, the basic path of humanity's evolution remains the same as it is now for almost 15,000 years. Right now, in the 21st century, this is canon. You, right now, Twitch streamer reacting to this video, you existed at a point in the Warhammer universe. But with time, humanity's ambition and the power of their...
Hear that, you guys? We're a part of this! We're definitely a part of this!
Technology becomes
Bricky said so!
unmatched, and the golden age of expansion begins. Humanity starts to branch out through the stars with powerful tools used for agriculture, mining, and expansion. Some branches of humanity would eventually settle far away from Earth itself, and around this time, the psychic ability of humans are greatly expanded, and what we begin to know as psychers appear. But despite all the progress, things would begin to collapse. The machines created to aid humanity would turn on them in M23, an event known as the Cybernetic Revolt, and trade would begin to collapse due to the immaterial warp, aka actual hell, beginning to cause ruptures in space and time. These warp stones would separate humanity, and this would be what is known as the Age of Strife.
The Age of Strife. Why? Or what caused? I mean, we already know the answer. What caused this rip in the fabric of hell, tearing through the fabric of reality itself? I mean, the birth of Slanesh, according to this one. But something new might have happened. New canon. But okay. So the Age of Strife is now beginning. All right. Let's not go to tangents now.
A sea of souls, storing all thought, emotion, and the souls of those who have passed on begin fluctuating into something terrible, as far on the horizon, something horrendous was brewing. You see, the warp isn't just a random assortment of chaotic energy. It is fairly well organized, thanks to those living in the galaxy. The warp itself acts as an afterlife of sorts, and the actions of the innumerable amount of creatures who live in the galaxy have manifested a a pantheon of organized entities known as the Forces of Chaos. At their helm are three major entities, Khorne, Nurgle, and Tzeentch. However, a fourth one, Slaanesh, was about to be born. The ancient Eldar were one of the first species created by the Old Ones, and due to their extreme and unbridled excess...
Alright, so humanity wasn't a part of it, since the Eldar was the first creation of chaos. Okay. But why bother? Were they bored? I mean, Tzeentch and Khorne definitely might have had a hand on it. Of course, Nurgle's just Nurgle. Slaanesh isn't born yet. Let's keep going.
The birthing of Slaanesh tore a hole in the galaxy and forever split the Eldar into those of the Craft world, who sought to bring their species back together, and those of the Drukhari, who wished to continue what caused the birth of Slaanesh in the first place. The birthing of this fourth chaos god settled the warp storms of the Immaterium and ended the age of strife, but humanity was still fractured. So one man revealed himself and spearheaded an immense attempt to reunite all the fractured pieces of humanity.
And he will
that
protect.
Man was the Emperor of Mankind. After reclaiming the nearly destroyed Earth, the Emperor embarked on the Unification Wars to unite humanity under the banner of the Imperium of Man. However, due to the very long and devastating impact of the Age of Strife, humanity as we know it is not the same. To reconquer Earth, the Emperor would need more than mere men. Great beings, known as the Thunder Warriors, were recruited by the Emperor to reclaim the Earth with ease. But these warriors are a blunt tool and had, overstayed their welcome. He would need something better, and that solution would be known as the...
Funny how these warrior races created and assembled almost always usually overstay their welcome.
The Space Marines. Superhuman soldiers that will have the skill and cunning exponentially greater than the mortal man. These new warriors would be commanded by an elite group of his very own sons known as the Primarchs. Unfortunately though, Daddy didn't charge the baby monitor, and his 18 sons would be stolen by the forces of chaos and scattered across the galaxy.
I'm so glad it's still there. Was there 18 or was there 20? Can someone please help me out in the comments? I still haven't gone to that part yet. Alright, we've only made Horus Heresy. We've only gone through the first book of Horus Heresy, Horus Rising. Alright.
This would begin the Great Crusade, a monumental task to take back the stars in the name of humanity and reclaim the lost Primarch sons. However, he would need the fires of industry to make this happen. Looking to the distant cousins of Mars, the Emperor signed a treaty with the technologically irradiated hellscape of the Red Planet and allowed the cult of the machine god, the Mechanicum, to supply his crusade. While Space Marines were the tip of the spear, their numbers pale to the vast might of the Imperial Army and Navy. The Astra Militarum and their seemingly endless numbers make up the bulk of the fighting force for humanity, supplied by the intelligence and prowess of various agents of the Imperium, such as rogue traders and assassins.
There we go. Okay. So, we've got the Emperor, we have the 18/20 sons, the Primarchs leading the Crusades, and then we have the Astra Militarum, the actual bulk, the actual military bulk of the Imperium, and then, of course, we have Mars, manufacturing and repairing, and basically providing all of these ships and weapons. Alright, someone has to keep it running. Very iffy, by the way. One of these days, we have to tackle it.
Due to the lack of connectivity between the worlds, what a society had become over thousands of years became mysterious and varied. Tools once used for harvesting and agriculture now are being used as machines of war in the form of imperial knights. Some of these fractures of humanity would even be changed further and become unrecognizable to the average human, with differences in size, skin color, appendages, cat ears, sometimes. Some would go so far to become their own galactic.
And yes, if this is your first time watching, we do have cat people and cat girls running around in this particular universe.
Societies like the miners of the galactic core and their immense supercomputers forming the leagues of Votan. After an incredible amount of effort and books, the lost sons of the Emperor would be reunited and the Imperium of Man would be firmly established.
Yep.
This, however, would not last. Be it intentional
of
or
course
accidental,
it wouldn't.
The Emperor would not reveal to his sons the true nature of the galaxy and the terrors of the warp. And this oversight would result in one of the most impactful wars in humanity's history. The favorite son of the Emperor, Horus, would fall to the powers of chaos and turn on his father. This betrayal, this backstabbing, this heresy, this horusheresy
of course,
would result in a split in the Imperium with devastating consequences. Half of the Emperor's loyal sons would fall to chaos and become the Chaos Space Marine.
Now, is that 18 sons or 20 sons?
Along with the forces of the Dark Mechanicum and the Chaos Knights. The
Yeah.
conflict would result in the absolute obliteration of Horus and the physical death of the Emperor himself. The near-dead body of the Emperor would be placed on the Golden Throne to serve as a beacon of humanity and allow for the continued ability to travel the stars, protected by his most loyal, the Adeptus Custodes. The Imperium would be vulnerable during this age of rebirth, and Terra would find itself under siege by one of the most formidable species in the galaxy, the Orcs. As time went on and memories of the Emperor's vision began to fade, the Emperor would become less of a head of state and more of a religious figure. And the Imperium would change to reflect this. The leadership on a planet would be at the behest of the High Lords of Terra, and their actions would be courtesy of the
Alright, so this is the time before Robot? Oh my god, it has been almost a year now since we started this series. Can someone please put down a Games Workshop video or something providing how to pronounce his first name? Robot. Because alright, the hype this is before he came to power, or this is before he started doing the whole Microsoft Excel thing.
Comparable power and authority of the Inquisition. The zealots of the Imperium would intensify and create a brand new era known as the Age of Apostasy. And this ecclesiarchal command of the Imperium would end up with one of the strongest fighting forces of Terra, the Adeptus Sororitas. Over time, this age would come to pass.
Alright, for those of you guys first time into this, watching this created, or this is one of the biggest sources of controversies regarding Games Workshop right now. A couple of months back, they announced that there has always been female Space Marines, but for a lot of fans or longtime fans or the core community provided that what would be the point? We already have the Adeptus Sororitas, and it has been long established since the beginning, all the way back, if I'm not mistaken, in 1987, that there were only male Space Marines. Why bother inserting females into that order if we already have the Adeptus Sororitas? Just like Bricky said, one of the most effective fighting forces of the Imperium.
And we would approach the 40th millennium of Warhammer 40,000.
Yes, finally! Yes.
Which, you guessed it, would come with its own form of problems. A primitive species once found during a recon mission would be able to evolve in relative secrecy for 6,000 years, becoming a highly advanced coalition of aliens known as the Tau Empire. And if the threats of the galaxy weren't bad enough, there are threats from outside the galaxy. As a monster has begun to wrap its tendrils around the Milky Way, the Tyranids, monsters that serve a psychic hive mind and present tactics previously unseen in the Milky Way. Be it a direct assault with their monstrous bug-like presence or through the more covert gene stealer cults, the presence of yet another threat in the galaxy is proving to be overwhelming to the Imperium. In the 41st millennium, there is no peace among the stars. At any point, your life can
That trailer, you guys, with Horus Heresy. We prepare for a war that never ends.
And will be threatened by the Xenos races uncountable, or by the arch enemy of chaos within, or by the decroded terror that is the Imperium itself.
Yeah.
It is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable.
Yep.
Forget the power of technology and science, or the safety of promise and understanding. For in the grim
no due
darkness
process
of the
here,
far
you guys.
future, there is only war.
Oh my god! That was just the opening! That was just the introduction! Holy crap! I feel the same.
5 years ago, I made every Warhammer 40k faction explained.
Yep.
A passion project of mine for a universe that I enjoyed so much. Its main purpose was to be a drawbridge, the separation between the layman who had only ever seen the big armored blue man situated neatly next to a Wetzel's Pretzels, and then the hardcore Warhammer lore nerd. That was just too wide, and there was nothing bridging these two together. Since 2020, Warhammer has exploded in popularity thanks to COVID, quality game updates, and a few excellent video games, and a couple miniseries. The sheer volume,
I mean, Henry Cavill might have something to do with it, but alright, let's keep on going.
of people
Big Daddy
who have
Witcher.
told me they have purchased miniatures due to that video alone makes me feel as if Games Workshop owes me commission. However,
It
that
probably
video
does.
is
It
incomplete.
probably does.
I was not a casual fan, but I was also not a hardcore lore junkie. In the 5 years since that video's release, multiple channels have sprouted up, and the drawbridge between casual to the obsessed has never been wider or easier to traverse. Even I, myself, have been a part of Adeptus Ridiculous, a podcast teaching lore in a much simpler and condensed form. Needless to say,
Adeptus
I've learned a
Ridiculous.
lot. Warhammer is so much more than just Spaceman shoots big gun. It has also grown substantially from its origins,
Yes,
being
it has.
a Warhammer Fantasy spin-off just in space. Now, it is a black library filled with immensely deep characters, difficult themes, and even some tear-jerking stories. It is a backdrop for a
Of
million
course.
stories over a million worlds, and I did not see its true depth in 2020. But now, I'd like to share what I've learned. We just had
Nice.
a brief summary of the world and each faction that takes place during it. And we did that because to truly understand each faction, we must understand what makes them the way they are. And to do so, we need to begin in chronological order, discussing their origins, their culture, their powers, and of course, what makes them oh so grimdark. So let's begin with the group that started it all and sing praise to the Infinite Empire.
The Necron.
As mentioned before, the Necron tier were the original form of the Necrons, an alien race far away from us that lived short, painful lives due to the irradiation of their star. Normally, this would manifest as like a sort of cancer, a space cancer of sorts. The Necrons are very much inspired by the ancient Egyptian aesthetic, but unlike the windswept dunes,
My only question is why bother to sleep after they stomped the Cathan and then they stomped the old ones? Why sleep at all?
commonly associated with it, the irradiated hellscape the Necrons here endured was far from picturesque. This also translates into their hierarchy. They are a race of nobles and peasants. Most of the peasants would often live for their very short amount of time, only a couple of decades, while the nobles tended to have better care and would live a little bit longer. But
So,
still
just like in
far
real
less than the
life?
average lifespan of a human, even today in the 21st century. The leader of the Necrons was Zarek, the Silent King.
Zarek.
He was the one who took the deal with the Catan and the Deceiver. Of course, he wasn't aware of the fact that they were known as the Deceiver at the time, but the whole species was blinded by hate after being debased by the Old Ones on their quest to cure their illness. The sheer pain that underwent the Necron race.
Alright, so that was the answer. They were all sick and dying. And then, of course, the old ones did nothing to help. So, they were there for vengeance, which was offered by the Catans.
can't be understated, as their fear was manic. The Catan are, of course, gods that eat stars, and when the leader of your species tells you to march into the gigantic green furnaces to ascend to immortality, you
go for it.
The scenes from these are long lines of both the peasantry and nobles clutching their loved ones in a frantic act to save their own lives. Many of them already inflicted in the late stages of the space cancer, some of them crawling into the biotransference furnaces, trying to outrace death itself, without realizing death was the one who made these to begin with. What came out the other side was a soulless husk. And I say that literally. A soul is not an abstract concept like it is in our world, an immaterial version of oneself discussed and debated in religion and philosophy. No,
here it's a real
Warhammer,
thing.
A soul is a real, tangible item of oneself. And the Catan basically were just like
ripped it out
to every single person who went in their furnaces. If you were a peasant, you came out a Necron warrior, and you as an individual have ceased to be. You have no mind, you have no soul, and your body, as you know it, is made of an extremely advanced mass of re-knitting living metal known as necrodermis. You cannot think for yourself, for you do not have a brain to think with. All you do now is await protocols from your overlords, which are the no.
So you're just a shell after you went through the furnace. I'm honestly thinking right now, if it was a fair trade, everything ripped away. I mean, technically, the Catans provided their end of the bargain or their end of the deal. But there's a reason why you don't make a deal with the devil, because they shall find a way to basically pervert the whole thing. And of course, this was a very perverse way of the Catans delivering on their end of the bargain. Interesting.
Nobles who came out of the furnaces with their minds intact, not their souls.
Just their minds.
But their minds are very much intact. These nobles now have command protocols, and they are able to command all of their peasantry and do with them whatever they wish. Zarek, the Silent King, is the most advanced of all the Necrons, a perfect metallic version of himself with incredible power and intelligence. His strength allowed him to lead the undead and the unthinking armies of the Necrons to battle against the Catan when they were at their weakest due to their incessant infighting, and then win back their freedom. But gods cannot die. So in reality, what occurred is the Catan were shattered into thousands of pieces, and each shard of their god was trapped in a stasis vault and mind controlled to do the bidding of the Necrons they once enslaved. The biggest challenge they...
Alright, so the Catan's quote-unquote souls cannot be destroyed, so they were simply smashed. Their pieces were trapped. It doesn't answer the question of why the Necrons decided to sleep.
Face now are actually the upstarts of the galaxy. The Eldar and the Orcs were quite prominent, and as you can imagine, a galactic war really takes its toll on the joints, or I guess the servos. It was in their best interest to wait out the galactic rise of the other races and come back at a more opportune time. So they went into stasis.
Alright, so new races went up, and now they just decided to wait it out. Okay, so Necrons aren't as powerful as we thought they were. Because I remember playing the Warhammer 40k RTS game of it by the same makers of Company of Heroes. I remember I hated the Necron faction so much because they were drop dead. And then after like a couple of minutes, these things would rise afterwards. Like literally from behind your lines. I hated it so much.
These massive tomb complexes hidden beneath various worlds, biding their time until it was once again their opportunity to rule the galaxy. Zarek, the Silent King, as penance for his failure to his people, exiled himself into the darkness between stars for the next 60 million years, with his perfect memory a constant reminder of the doom he inflicted upon his people.
The darkness between the stars. I wonder where that is.
Forward to the modern day, and the Necrons are reawakening, but it isn't working as well as it could be. Whether the tomb world is reawakened naturally or by some imperial moron stepping on a green glowing rock, the Necrons have come back to reclaim a galaxy they consider rightly theirs. But 60 million years of hypersleep have taken their toll. Many Necron dynasties awake with systems unrestored and huge swaths of their population's minds completely lost. Necron nobles wake with various mental faculties compromised, sometimes exhibiting traits similar to excessive paranoia, schizophrenia, or even dementia. One notable Necron, Nemesaur Zandrek, believes that he is still back on his home planet fighting off separatists and interlopers. See, Oberyn, the separatists come, attempting to outflank me as they did at the 4th Battle of Vindach. How they calculate that daubing themselves green and roaring like savages will produce a different outcome, I cannot fathom. But it is of no account. Ready, my legions. Another glorious victory.
Alright, so no perfect system, and perhaps going to sleep for 60 million years wasn't the right decision.
Shall soon be ours. Other individuals, such as the esteemed Imhotep the Stormlord, seek to usurp the newly returned Silent King for rightful ruler over the Necron race, believing his time has come to an end, while scientists and archaeologists like Trazen the Infinite and Orikin the Diviner spend thousands of years bickering over artifacts and petty squabbles. Truly, the Necrons are a faction of unthinkable, unimaginable power, held back entirely.
Yep. All that power, and they still couldn't set aside their petty differences and, of course, their petty imperfections. You have a senile old man thinking he's back in his original world. You've got factions bickering. So what happened to the Silent King then?
By their own hubris and 60 million years of stasis. It is a species that does not know of time, only of the ravages brought by it. A pharaoh of a dynasty may just be as frightened to awake completely mad as they are to be assassinated while they sleep. Thousands of years pass in an instant. There is a play, like an opera play, a retelling of the war in heaven in the Necron culture that takes 40 years to witness, because why leave? You have no need to eat or vacate your bowels. You are immortal, but you are soulless. Despite the Necrons' incredible technology, their mastery over time, reality itself, despite all of this, they still are missing a soul. And therein lies the biggest struggle. Most Necrons look to conquest the galaxy, kill the interlopers like the humans, Eldar, and orcs that scrape at a fraction of their power. But the end goal for many, including Zarek himself, is to return the souls to their bodies.
Of course.
To undo the horrible fate he cast upon them. This is not the interest of all. Many simply wish to rule their dynasty.
I mean, that's actually quite noble by the king himself, whose fault. Well, this whole thing's his fault, right? So I guess he's just trying to make things right. Operative word is trying, but this is the grim dark. There are no good guys here.
With an iron fist and kill all they consider unworthy. But to many others is to undo this
petty factions
decision that doomed them all. Before they can do that, there is a pest that needs exterminating. That is the fundamental understanding of the Necrons. They are so hyper advanced that their science borders on magic. They play with the fundamental aspects of reality and time. Their mastery of the physical galaxy is the strongest in the universe. Their weapons reduce people to the barest molecules, and they have devices capable of causing stars to supernova. They are unfathomably difficult to kill, as if you do fell one of their number, the living metal reknits itself, and the reanimation protocols allow it to come back alive once again. They're masters of teleportation, and often killing a Necron fully will just have its consciousness translocated back to their tomb world to await reassembly. Normally they utilize large phalanxes of warriors and honorary combats, but
in that RTS, there was literally no way in actually destroying a Necron unit. It literally just falls down and sleeps or something, and then it comes back to life after a few minutes.
Some of them have fallen to various mind viruses. The destroyer cults are hell-bent on killing anything and everyone that lives with an overwhelming force. And then there's the flayed ones. Necrons cursed with I have no mouth and I must scream, a panic attack virus as the last laugh of Landogo, the Flayer Catan. Slowly losing their minds, they strip apart their foes and adorn their bodies with the skin of their enemies, trying to better return to their old feelings of flesh and blood.
They wear the skin of their enemies.
A degraded version of their mighty empire, and still one of the biggest threats in the galaxy. The only thing keeping them at bay currently is their...
Now there's a pattern. Everything is a big threat in the galaxy. Question is, threat to who? Humanity? Threat to who? That's a big thing. Alright, we've got the Tau. Greater good, threat to who exactly?
Awakening sickness, and they're infighting with no care to the timeline. But they are coming. And slowly, they plan to rid this galaxy of the vermin that inhabit it. My people shackled the stars and broke mortality when the species you sprang from had barely left the slime pools it spawned in. Our wars burned reality, and the dominion of our kings is without limit. The ground you tread on is not yours, it is ours. The war in heaven was a catastrophic time for the galaxy, and as stated in the above quote, burned reality. Of course, souls exist in Warhammer, and in the case of the Necron tier, they were consumed by the star gods. This begs the question, however, if you were to pass on, expire, as one might put
where does it go?
Where would your soul go? The answer to this is the warp. In Warhammer, a soul is real, and so is hell. The afterlife, the Empyrean, the Sea of Souls, the Immaterium, all of these names refer to the dimension parallel to our own known as the warp. Now, the warp is not like our reality. It does not follow the classic normalcy of time and space. It is defined as the Sea of Souls, and it acts like this in a more literal way than you can realize.
So, warp equals Sea of Souls. Alright, got it.
To imagine the warp is to imagine the sea itself. Hell is real, and you can surf on it. It has a current and can become more dangerous depending on where you go and how bad the weather is.
So, hell is real and you can surf on it. Imagine that. So, hell is real and you can surf on it. Imagine that.
Materium is a reflection of our reality and of our souls. All thoughts, all emotions, all feeling that goes with a soul is passed on into the warp. If an entire planet decides it's going to engage in a blood-fueled rampage of murder and gore, then the warp around that planet will be affected in a similar manner. It's not something that you can see. It is a parallel, not perpendicular dimension. But it is changing. To expose oneself to the warp for any period of time invites certain death outside of the most iron-willed of individuals, and to stare into it will drive one mad. Much like the open seas, things dwell in the warp. Whether these beings were always there and were just emboldened by the carnage of the galaxy, we can only speculate at. At a time, you could say it was more calm. But a certain faction's galactic war in heaven didn't do it any favors. Now the warp is turbulent, and its realms belong to a pantheon of gods known simply as The forces of chaos are beings that serve directly under their patron deity. There are 4 current gods of chaos at the moment: Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh. Each of them represent various facets of and emotions of sentient species and play a great game against one another for total control over their realms.
Alright, so how it happened? The war in heaven shook things up in the warp. But the question is, how did these chaos gods came to be? Were they born from the said war in heaven?
Interestingly enough, while their disciples have physical forms, we can understand the chaos gods do not have a physical visual that you can perceive in reality. So while there are tons of fantastic fan art, we do not know what they truly look like. though they are conveniently color-coded. Khorne is the god of blood and murder, carnage and slaughter. He is the one who is most powered by the whole.
So blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. Yeah, he's that guy. He's definitely that guy.
Wholesale killing of any living thing, for Khorne cares not from where the blood flows. With a sacred number of 8, he is the lord of all things involving killing and blood and gore. The champions are extremely strong as well, with monumental muscles and extremely large weapons. A true analog
So heavy metal covers.
to Khorne would be his greater demon, the Bloodthirster, an enormous muscle-bound flying devil with an axe so large it splits tanks in a single swing. They move into battle with armor of brass adorned by the skulls of their foes and pools of freshly spilt blood. This may appear to be quite frightening, of course. Demonic, one might say. But in the world of chaos, all emotions feed one of these gods in one way or another. If you were to define Khorne with single words, you would use blood, carnage, murder, skulls. But you'd be missing out on important ones like strength, honor, prowess, courage, and skill. Khorne is
So every god is a yin-yang representation of two extremes, the virtuous and the vile.
Not just about the wholesale slaughter of people. He is about the honor and power of martial combat. The true strength there is in besting someone in physical strength and skill. Of course, a murderer would be someone who would feed Khorne, but a soldier could feed Khorne. A martial artist or professional fighter could feed Khorne. A warrior, good or bad, feeds Khorne. A diplomat does not. A premier soldier does. A GoFundMe does not. This is what leads many mortals down the path of Khorne, for he will bless those that bring him enough skulls. And in a world this destructive, there are many ways to reap a high tally for him. Prepare the dread claws and unchain the mad ones.
The mad
Glorious
ones.
battle awaits us today, for the world below has refused to surrender. Let us descend upon them with fury and rage, giving no quarter and sparing only those
the
warriors who
warriors.
fight well enough to earn a place amongst us. As to the rest, their lives and possessions are ours, but their skulls are for Khorne.
Check. Oh, hold up. Check that out. So upon them giving no quarter and sparing only those warriors who fight well enough to earn a place amongst us. Sound familiar? Valhalla.
Normally, if I ever want to explain Khorne, I just kind of show him this clip.
I'd never stab you in the back, Shepard. Warriors like you and me, straight to the face.
Moving on, Tzeentch is the second god, the god of trickery and mischief, the changer of ways, the great conspirator and the architect of fate. With a sacred number of 9, Tzeentch is truly the god of change in all of its forms, but there is an obvious undercurrent of
tricksters, conspirator, but towards what? Alright, if you're going to mire yourselves in controversy, there has to be a specific purpose. Him, I don't understand for the simple reason that I don't find any purpose to him. Like, you're not doing anything controversial, you're just doing random crap. At least it's how I feel about Tzeentch. But then, again, some could argue that being a chaos god, he's simply having fun by messing with other people's plans. That's it.
mischief and cunning. Tzeentch is such a liar that his pants have gone thermonuclear.
Yeah.
His favorite pastime is asking questions that have no answers while simultaneously making up answers on the spot to a question he didn't ask.
Have you ever had a dream that you had you could him to do?
The answer is yes.
You could do anything.
He is such a conniving little bastard that every emotion of lying, of scheming, of trickery is a direct way to help feed him. An unfaithful partner, a politician, a spy. All these people feed.
So that diplomat would definitely help him.
Tzeentch in one way or another, and it doesn't matter if the intentions are good. Acceptance does not feed Tzeentch. Change does. Tzeentch doesn't care about your facts. He only wants opinions. Because he represents change, he also represents hope, though. Schemes are not always bad, and even the hope to make a better tomorrow is the change he seeks. Because he is the architect of fate and the mastery of sorcery, his presence is purely unknowable. Every depiction of a Tzeentchian demon contains more eyes than are necessary and more mouths than I know what to do with. It is a biblically accurate angel if the angel gaslit you into thinking birds are government drones. But are they? The creatures at his disposal adorn themselves with the knowledge of sorceries and the unknown, all to provide a mind-crushing experience. Fighting demons from outside of our reality is difficult enough, but fighting demons from unreality, purposely attempting to trick you, is a whole new thing entirely. And that is before we even get started on the gigantic bird of sorcery you're going to need to face. Do not ask which creature screams in the night. Do not question who waits for you in the shadow. It is my cry that wakes you in the night, and my body that crouches in the shadow. Whoa. I am Tzeentch, and you are the puppet that dances to my tune. Third of the Chaos Gods is the one of acceptance of rot and pestilence, the grandfather himself, Papa Nurgle. Nurgle is the exact opposite of Tzeentch. Where Tzeentch believes in change and hope for a future, Nurgle believes in stagnation and the end of everything. At one point or another, we will all decay. We will all rot, and we will all end. And with a sacred number of 7, every single thing, pestilence, boil, and everything in between, comes under the great shadow and girth of Nurgle himself. For Nurgle, the plight of mortals is his fear and wine. And no matter how solid life might be, everything will decay in the end.
Everything will end.
In the creation of life, there must be an end to
cycle.
That life. And nobody has more creations to end lives than Grandfather Nurgle himself. Every boil, every blemish, every pus-filled wound and disease, every rot and every plague is kept and concocted by Nurgle. This, humorously, keeps Nurgle as a jovial god. He is full of life and laughter, and by creating as many diseases as he possibly can, he shares that joy with mortals. I mean, his envoy is the great unclean one, and look at how happy he is. And there's a lot.
I mean, that is his purpose.
A fear of death in general is feeding Nurgle. All disease makes him stronger, but to pray for salvation for a wounded loved one is to feed Nurgle. The timeless and inevitable fear that one
yin and yang.
day you will rot and decay is what gives him strengths. The Peloton won't feed Nurgle. Licking the doorknob on a public bathroom certainly does. However, should you embrace your grandfather's gifts, you may find an end to your pain. Maybe. All mortal followers of the Chaos Gods found themselves there in one way or another, either through the direct worship or the slow corrupting of their souls. But those that take Nurgle's gifts and embrace the decay of their bodies may end up being chosen among his few as a faithful servant. In doing so, you will be free of the pain caused by Nurgle's ailments, and you may even find yourself just as jovial and happy as he is.
Can someone please put it down with regards to the 18/20 sons? Who followed who? And why? I mean, like, for example, Fulgrim definitely followed Slaanesh because of all the sex stuff. But what about the rest?
Maybe. His enemies shall wither and die. His allies shall wither and die. The universe and all within it shall wither and die. And when the great corruption has settled over the land and permeated the very foundations of reality itself, then shall the Lord of all rise from the rot and ruin, spread his arms wide to reclaim all of his dutiful children. Those were the 3 major Chaos Gods for a very long time, emboldened by war and death on a galactic scale, ever present, but now fact on the suffering of a galaxy. One race, for a while, was able to elude the pull of chaos. An advanced race of psychically attuned aliens whose master over the physical world was so strong that chaos could not gleam from them the morsels of power.
I mean, at this point, who isn't a master of the physical realm? I mean, here's the thing. We have to accept the good and the bad, just as with any franchise or just as with any story. Alright? And the problem is, it every now and then, or at a certain point, it all gets redundant. Okay?
They once had. Or so they couldn't. Not for a long while. 60 million years ago, in an attempt to combat the Necrons in Catan, the Old Ones made a new species. One with innate power in the warp and the ability to harness it with a mastery that was unseen by so many others.
Of course they did. Okay, so the Catans basically fooled the Necrons or the Necron tiers. So the Old Ones made their own version, which are
a mastery so powerful, the Necrons retreated to sleep in order to wait it out. It was no longer a galaxy to be ruled by them, but instead begin the age of the...
Yes!
The Eldar are a race of pointed-eared humanoids that are all psychically attuned to the warp. If we're being meta here, these are space elves, and these elves ruled the galaxy in the time the Necrons went to sleep and humanity began to rise. The Eldar's empire was galaxy-wide and lasted for longer than any other galactic power that we know of. Their understanding of all things was,
in other words, they forced the Necrons to sleep.
Exceptional. With every single one of them being psychers, they had the ability to master the warp and use it to their advantage. See, being a psyker is basically like being a wizard, or I guess in this case it's more of a sorcerer, since you are born with the gifts as opposed to learning them. In order to utilize your psychic abilities, however, you must then reach into the other dimension, into the warp, into hell for that power. So if you were to say, cast fireball, your mind would reach into the warp, gather the strength to rewrite reality
into your hand,
to then cast fireball. Now, you might think to yourself, doesn't that mean if you are opening up a power to the warp, you may create a lot of risk to yourself because of all the horrible things we just talked about in the warp?
Yes, they are.
However, in Warhammer 40k, willpower is a real, tangible thing, in the sense that in its own right, it can be weaponized. Being strong of will means being strong of soul, and being strong of soul means you can resist the pull of the warp that much more.
Weaponized
a more
will.
Inexperienced psyker opens up a hole into the warp that is large, and that hole widens to get more power, allowing evil things to get in. A powerful psyker is able to open a very small hole, but with immense force to get the same amount of power with less risk. The Eldar are master psychers. Every single one of them can call upon the warp, and over millions of years they have perfected it so much so that they can...
I just realized I've never encountered them, either on the table or on the RTS. Huh. Weird.
Weave structures out of it. In some species in the galaxy, they utilize the warp itself for interstellar travel. The Eldar ain't having any of that noise. How about we utilize a fancy alternative mode of travel that is substantially safer than the old ones created, called the Webway? What about dying? Miss me with that. We no longer age. And if we do, we can just be reborn like that. Food, water, materials, we make things out of distilled warp essence itself. We send unreality into cathedrals to dine in. What truly could the Eldari Empire possibly fear?
Yep. Themselves, of course.
The Eldari Empire's biggest fear was themselves. The society so perfect they wanted for naught, and this led them down dark and dangerous paths.
They actually made this study, like, in welfare states, high suicide rates, especially during the winter. That's why they had to invent powerful versions of lighting, especially during the winter, in order to curb suicide rates. Because you want for nothing Crops failed, it's government insured. No problem whatsoever. Anyways, the whole thing sort of backfired in a way that as humans, we need to be challenged. And without that challenge, it, ultimately leads into depression. I honestly forgot where I read it or where I found that study. But anyways, what are the downsides of living in a welfare state where you want for nothing? Where you are perfectly covered by welfare or by social structures?
When the base functions of society are no longer a problem for you,
See,
you
no
tend
longer
to
a problem.
Experiment. Perhaps the medium rare steak on your plate would be better if it was elf meat. Hey, I'm not saying we should make cannibalism legal, but like, what's the issue with a little taste? Violent sports is one thing, but how come we don't do sports to the death? I mean, I'm just saying, like, if both participants are willing and clear about it, like, what really is the problem there, you know?
I mean, technically, there's a waiver.
Art is in the eye of the viewer, and what is considered art is completely up to the concept of one's own interest. A canvas adorned with the blood of a man wronged is truly the visual poetry that our society needs. Hedonism. With a slow and consistent hedonism, the Eldar slid backwards into debauchery of the sort I cannot discuss on this YouTube video.
That they
Murder
did.
on stage, delicacies and drugs distilled from one another, the trade of slaves and concubines, and much worse. The Eldar physiology has their emotions heightened, and they can feel more than a human does. So while it can provide lows of pure despair, it can also provide greater highs than you have ever known. And swinging between the two of them,
imagine the orgasm. I mean, that's what crack's for.
Was the Eldar game. The Warp took notice of this heavily, and it began to react. On a galactic scale, the debauchery and the hedonism of the Eldar race caused levels of warp storm so pronounced and so volatile that it cut off interstellar travel for all those who used it. Communications between planets was removed, and a nightmarish era of old night began. This continued for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. The Eldar all but removed from the problems being caused as they entered heights of more and more ecstasy. They needed more and more and more. Nothing was ever enough. More murder, more torture. It's art, it's delicacies, it's life. This silence offends Slaanesh. Wait. Slaanesh, the prince of pleasure, she who thirsts, the god of unspeakable excess, is our fourth chaos god with the sacred number of 6 adorning their title. Slaanesh is a bit of a tricky one, because with our other 3 chaos gods, there was a certain understanding.
Is he a she? Is he a he? We will never know, and it all depends on the pleasure of the beholder.
Of human emotions and desires, but for Slaanesh, that desire is how they get their power. The words to be used would be decadence, pleasure, perfection, passion, excess, and many others. The pursuit of more, the want to do more, experience more, become more. That's what gives Slaanesh their gifts. A lot of people believe that Slaanesh is something that originates with sex, specifically. And
not
it makes
necessarily.
Sense why they assume that. The visuals of Slaanesh patrons are all very lithe and sexual, but they are
BDSM.
also intentionally androgynous to appear attractive to a variety of intrigues. However, to think that Slaanesh specifically derives from sex would be mistaken. While it is true that a lot of humanity's actions can relate to getting laid, and Slaanesh is the dark prince of desire, it's more on the lines of feeling an excess of an emotion. It is excessive touch and scent and desire, and a lot of that has to do with sex. That's why it looks like sex, but it's more than just that. A patron of the arts may feed Slaanesh, one that aspires to become the perfect chef or master of their craft.
So imagine that dude from the bear. That's it. All that screaming, all that rage for his craft. Definitely one of Slaanesh's
And the sheer pursuit of that alone will feed Slaanesh. Whiplash is Slaanesh's absolute favorite film. Videos where people beat Elden Ring on a dance pad feed Slaanesh.
There are no two words in the English language more harmful than good job.
Wait, what was the name of this? Miles Teller and that guy, the drum guy? The perfection of their art,
also moves
the music.
The concept of feeling. Sensation is a majorly Slaanesh-coded thing. It might start off feeling good, but then you get to play around a little bit, you know? You play with a little bit of pain. Light pain might not be enough, so you might want more. Or inflicting the pain could be your jam. Music can increase to volumes that may hurt your ears, and even then that might not be enough. More. You must have more. Many of the disciples of Slaanesh carry a demonic form in their lithe grace. The Keeper of Secrets is his chosen envoy, and their movements are a blur of dance and pain with an aura all the more fatal. They dance and sing, but there's always a form of malice behind every action they take. An alluring gaze that will pull you in right before the demonic entity can crush you in that grip. Slaanesh's palace has 6 layers surrounding it, and one of them is the excess of gluttony, where the participant finds themselves in a beautiful banquet full of the most delicious foods imaginable. Tables of delicacies and rivers of wine tempt the user to such a degree that they cannot stop stuffing their face, unaware that the things they
So in other words, Joey Chestnut's palace, or at least Joey Chestnut's lair,
are eating are very vaguely familiar meat. If one does not see themselves drowning in the river of wine, they may soon fill their bodies up so much that they cease to function and fall over, becoming part of the banquet themselves.
Do not Google this.
Of these 6.
Do not Google this, alright? Do not Google it, this particular tag. You were warned, alright? This is Slaanesh we're talking about. Do not Google this tag.
Layers of Slaanesh's palace. This was the ecstasy that the Eldar civilization indulged in for millennia, and did so at a monumental scale that they create a god from it. Find pleasure in every moment, indulge in every whim, let lesser races feel the burden of their crude lives. We are beyond such concerns or worries. Every power is ours to use, every sensation ours to experience. We are truly masters of the galaxy, and all others exist only to satisfy our curiosities. We have earned our position of power. Let us forever taste the fruits of such achievement. Time itself is ours to command. We are eternal.
Of course.
With the birth of Slaanesh, the Eldari Empire ceased to be. A catastrophic event so horrible that the warp ripped a hole permanently in our reality. A fissure forever known as the Eye of Terror. With the sudden inhalation of this god's largest breath, the Eldari souls are a currency to be now collected by she who thirsts. Trillions of Eldar died in an instant. Slaanesh gorging on their souls to satisfy his palate. 99.9% of their entire species died, and the rest are doomed to a fate worse than death. For Slaanesh now stakes a claim on each and every Eldar soul. From the moment they pass on, an eternity of torment awaits them. The remaining Eldar devote their entire lives to stopping this eventuality. Their dying race so devoted to saving themselves from the Dark Prince, and in doing so, have found very creative ways. In the modern world of Warhammer, the craft world Eldar are the main force of Eldar in the galaxy and represent the elf style that many think of when you think elves in space. Fantasy elves in space, not those elves. We'll get to them. A craft world is a monumentally large starship, the size of a continent, that acts as a form of flotilla. During the highest reaches of hedonism, many Eldar saw the demonic writing on the wall and began to try and seek asylum from their own debauchery.
So in other words, they made several arcs to basically escape the flood of Slaanesh, to escape the flood of debauchery.
Those Eldar left on monumental craft worlds into the far reaches of the galaxy and saved themselves from Slaanesh's awakening. The main thing the craft world Eldar seek is to temper their minds and bodies in a way that will never allow them to slide back into their old ways. The representation they carry is that of a more feudal Japanese motif. Eldar follow paths as they age, the path of the warrior, the seer, the poet, the diplomat, the bone singer, and so on. These paths are a strict code of conduct to hone the heightened Eldar psychology down a school of thought.
So they have parallel castes. They don't have a hierarchical castes. Alright, good enough. That's one way to maintain ranks and discipline among each other and among themselves.
In action. And if it sounds a hell of a lot like Bushido, well, you're damn
Probably
right.
is.
Here's a medal and a soul stone. Don't lose it or an eternity of torment awaits you. Going through these paths will allow you to take up not just a role in Eldar society, but keep your mind clear from the past worries that plagued them. Every Eldar is said to be a psyker, however, very few of them actually utilize their psychic powers for fear of tempting she who thirsts. A large amount of emphasis is also put
again, was it he who thirsts or she who thirsts? Up to the follower or to the beholder.
Ancestors of the Eldar and learning from them the farther you go down a path. This can sometimes be seen by the large variety of jewels adoring the armor of Eldar. Those are called soul stones, the biggest middle finger to Slaanesh they can think of. See, when an Eldar dies, these stones act as a backup, and instead of their souls going to Slaanesh, they are then trapped and stored in this little stone. So when the Eldar say they commune with their ancestors, they mean so very literally, as the spirit and soul of generations before them are stored here.
So the older your family is, the more soul stones you have. So basically you hold on to the souls of your family members, so it doesn't go to Slaanesh. That is amazing.
Often, larger structures may contain vast amounts of soul stones, such as the Infinity Circuit in the craft world itself, allowing these soul...
Is it like the Voldemort? What do you call that Voldemort thing again? The one where Harry Potter and company needed to destroy Horcrux. So is it like a Horcrux? Can it be destroyed? And if it is destroyed, does it mean that the soul goes to Slaanesh now?
Souls of the dead to help power their enormous starship. The young do not desire the discipline of the path, but rather their curiosity drives them to try every fruit from the tree. Thus, it is that so many take the path of wandering or the path of damnation in their first years of adulthood. And so, the great tragedy of our kind is played out again and again as the number of our people shrink from generation to generation.
So they are dying, and some of them, you know what, maybe the whole Slaanesh thing might not be such a bad thing after all.
These paths, when completed, allow an Eldar to move to the next one, then the next one. However, since this is the grim darkness of the world, many of these paths rely on combat. The Eldar actually had gods at one point. Cain, Vol, Isha, Azrayan, and so on. These gods are aspects of the Eldar pantheon, and while many were killed in Slaanesh's creation, their teachings live on. For some, the strongest devotion to the Eldar gods is to join the Aspect Warriors and embody the wrath of Cain, their god of war. While guardians of the Eldar craft worlds are more akin to a trained militia, the Aspect Warriors embody a particular variant of the path. Each are led by a Phoenix Lord, a name passed down from generations and embodying the souls of prior Phoenix Lords with each new one. The Howling Banshees, led by Jane Zar, Fugin and his Fire Dragons, Baharoth and his Swooping Hawks, or Malgan Ra and his Dark Reapers. Each aspect shrine carries with it the Eldar way of war. Fast, hard-hitting, and incredibly tricksy, for they do not have the numbers to fight
Eldar Way of War. Again, never seen him on the table
in any other way. The Craftworld Eldar show how mangled an empire can be by their own actions. They once ruled the galaxy in an honest, non-hyperbolic way, but in the end, they were bested by themselves. And their most prominent remnants are forced to drift aimlessly through the galaxy, trying to save their species from extinction and resist the temptations of she who thirsts.
Thank you for watching, guys. So if you want me to check out other stories here on YouTube, please let me know in the comments. We upload on the weekends, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Also, check out our Twitch channel where you can watch me do this live. And please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do the whole notification button thing to help me out with the algo, and class dismissed.